This is not the church of Joseph Smith.
Okay, Travis Wayne Goodsell, take 2 on this video. Somebody was in need of explaining how the church is derived from the Illuminati. So I had to give the full history, as I should be having lunch right now. But as a result, I got exposed to a cute kitty, which I am now allergic to again. And so I've got the itchy eyes and the itchy back of the neck, and I'll be coughing probably a lot as the residue of mold in my apartment that I discussed about from last year's incident is still giving me grief. So let me get back into the mood. In this morning's video, at the very end, I dropped a bombshell. So there's more incentive for you to stay to the end of my videos as much as you desperately want to turn it off and go to some other channel. What I then wanted to do after thinking about that was, what does a presiding patriarch do that's different from a father patriarch who gives blessings? Now, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have families, and the father is the patriarch, and there's a tradition of the fathers giving baby blessings. They don't call it patriarchal blessings, they call it baby blessings, or father's blessings instead. And they don't allow the fathers to record the blessings for their children. I didn't follow that counsel. I snuck in a recording device and then had it typed out after for my children. Hopefully the ex preserved it for them. The last child, obviously, I didn't get to bless. They call it, whatever. Anyway, this practice of fathers giving blessings goes way back into the Old Testament. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, giving blessings to their children. And the famous one is Isaac, as a blind man, and I've gone over this of the Egyptian connections and where it derives from the Egyptian stories, but Isaac is blind in his old age, and in his old age, he's not supposed to be old because he was assigned Rebecca at a regular time frame, and so he was already having kids by the time Abraham sacrificed him. And of course, the whole Bible is messed up as to that, as well as the Gospels are messed up as to Jesus and, for example, his birthday. Which one of the half a dozen is it? Which is the right birthday? So anyway, Jacob and Esau are born from Rebekah, and Jacob is called Jacob because he's holding on to the leg or ankle of, I'm pretty sure it would have been an ankle, because that would correspond with the Achilles heel incident and correspond with the Egyptian stuff as well. He's called Jacob, the usurper. And so when they're older, Esau is the birthright blessing son because he came out first, but he's stranded out in the wilderness, and So Rebecca has Jacob send out a bowl of porridge. Again, the author did not want to refer to it as salad. Instead, he wanted to refer to it as porridge. But went out, gave him the porridge, and sold his birthright. Birthright has to do with the leadership in the tribe. Then Rebecca had her son Jacob put on a coat of animal coat. It was furry to fool Isaac, who was blind, into giving up Esau's blessing to Jacob as well. The blessing has to do with property, inheritance, rather than tribal leadership. Typically, the birthright blessing son gets both, and Jacob does get both, but he got Esau to give up birthright first, then blessing. And so that's why Esau is pissed with Jacob. And then there's that angel fight thing, and then all of a sudden Esau appears. And so, Jacob steals the birthright blessing from Esau. And so the father's blessing comes from those Old Testament stories of fathers blessing their children. Jacob then goes and blesses each of his children, and Joseph being a fruitful bough, etc. And so Mormons are then saying, oh, that refers to the mountains of Ephraim to dwell, with the hymn. And so patriarchs, however, have usurped the father's right to give blessings to their children. And the stake patriarch is the one who gives patriarchal blessings, which are the exact same as the father's blessings. And so an assignment to one of the 12 tribes of Israel is given in the patriarchal blessing, and a knowledge of what you did before you came to earth in the pre-mortal spirit heaven, and what you are going to do here on earth, with your calling in the church. And for guys, typically you have a patriarch focusing on a mission, to get you focused on a mission, and stuff like that. And my patriarch was a family member, a cousin or an uncle of one of my parents, my mom's side, I believe. And so he tried to do better than his typical assignment in the stake, because I was family, and so he interviewed me beforehand, asked me what I wanted to do for a living, career, and I said, well, I got my security guard license, which cost me starting in one of the games at basketball, because the basketball coach had to punish me for not showing up to practice. And so, a private investigator is what I was thinking about becoming, like Thomas Magnum, as I had the short sleeve outer shirts, similar to Thomas Magnum, though he had it as the only shirt. I wore the Miami Vice Don Johnson style of the Thomas Magnum look, but I merged the two together, I guess, to create a whole new look. But anyway, that's what I was telling him I was thinking about for a career. But I hadn't gone on a mission yet. And come to find out that the mission would change my life forever into a new direction that would get me in trouble with the church. Everything's so loud for this one video. Yeah, it's not my dad who gave me the patriarchal blessing. And it was this patriarch. And so that's always been confusing. What was the purpose of the general or the presiding patriarch of the church? And I can't find it. It's not in Mormon scripture. There's the part where Hyrum becomes the presiding patriarch, as he is the older brother of Joseph when their father died, Joseph Sr., who had been the patriarch, but I can't find anything. He's just was the patriarch until he dies, and then Joseph has that passage where he says Hyrum is a patriarch and a prophet, seer, and revelator, not translator. Joseph Jr. is prophet, seer, revelator, and translator, not patriarch, because that's Hyrum's position as the birthright blessing son, which is an interesting twist on what we currently practice. Because, what was his name? Let's see. Emeritus. Yeah. Elder G. Smith was the last patriarch in the church, and Kimball booted him out in October 1979. Wanted nothing to do with him, and ended the office of General Patriarch. And under the thinking that, well, we have stake patriarchs now, there's no need for a general patriarch. Sure. Okay. But what was the role of the general patriarch? And I still can't find the answer as to what he was doing, other than if he's the one giving blessings, which are understood to come from God to the person they're laying their hands upon. Read the Doctrine and Covenants passages again. And remember when I was talking about my research and finding out that Joseph Smith Sr. was the one in charge of the whole operation of setting up the publication and writing of the Book of Mormon, and that I had revealed previously that he was the one who got mad at Joseph Jr. for losing 116 pages, that it wasn't the Lord, it was Joseph Smith Sr. That's the coding that they put into the Doctrine and Covenants, which is also in the Book of Mormon. If you're unfamiliar with the 1981 version of the Scriptures, of the Triple, which included the Doctrine and Covenants, the church service missionaries did the best they could at decoding what they assumed needed to be decoded with which particular historical church figure. And I've pointed out already in other videos that they missed Babylon in section 1, verse 16. They left it in the coded name, because Babylon, that's been destroyed for a long time now. What are they talking about with Babylon? Well, that's the part of the coding that they had in the Doctrine and Covenants and in the Book of Mormon, which I've been pointing out on my playlist, Book of Mormon Code, or Coding. And then it just hit me this morning, oh yeah, if Joseph Sr. is the Lord in section 3 and section 10, it would follow that he's also the Lord through the rest of the Doctrine and Covenants till he dies in 1840. This whole project, this whole organization, the whole Book of Mormon was on Joseph Smith Sr., not Jr. He was the one in charge of it all. And he just became the patriarch, as he was the patriarch of the family. He became the patriarch of the organization because he was in charge of the Book of Mormon and the organization. And so what I'm now realizing is that all of the revelations, not just 3 and 10, they were all by the patriarch to Joseph Smith Jr. And so I then checked who the scribes were, and they weren't very clear. They have, was it John Whitmer, who was the scribe for the Book of Commandments, but that can't be the case because section 3 and 10 was before the Whitmers got involved. And so that can't be entirely correct. And it seems like he was only the one to assemble it into the Book of Commandments rather than being the scribe. Because it's clear John Whitmer, if I'm getting the right brother, the whole Whitmer family was unaware of this whole organization and the Book of Mormon and the origins for the Book of Mormon. And so, yeah, there doesn't seem to be a scribe for the Doctrine and Covenants in the sense that we understand it. So isn't that interesting? There were other scribes and clerks, eventually they called the clerk, but they weren't the ones writing down his revelations. Now Joseph Smith did speak publicly, and people were doing scribal work for those incidences, but that's different. And so it does seem like Joseph Smith Sr. is the one who's dictating all of the Doctrine and Covenants to 1840, when Joseph then had to take over, unless Hyrum took over and started dictating to Joseph until he died. Joseph's talks being separate from that. And that's very interesting. Yeah, that puts on a whole new light on the intended purpose of the presiding patriarch for the church. Very interesting. But there's more bombshells for you. And I get this from Wikipedia, which typically they don't provide this kind of information. But there is oftentimes things that lead me to other things to research. But check this out. Up until the beginning of the 20th century, patriarchs were compensated for their time, and this refers to Brigham's patriarchs. They're not telling you about Joseph Sr. and Hyrum. And then they died, and then Brigham's took over and assigned patriarchs again. So that's who they're referring to as Brigham's patriarchs. Were compensated for their time either by charging for blessing, for a patriarchal blessing. They charged Mormons for this. Holy crap, what a scam! Or later receiving a stipend from the church headquarters. You turn in your hours and you get paid. The practice of charging for blessings was put to an end when it came to the attention of the church leadership that patriarchs were traveling door to door and underbidding each other in the price of blessings. So they were poaching other people's territories. There was gang warfare among the patriarchs. Unbelievable. So I'd never known that. Man, but there's more. Let's see. Yeah, there was a tradition among church members that a blessing for health, and it's not supposed to be a blessing for health, because remember, Nelson condemned all of us Melchizedek priesthood holders for not actually giving a blessing, and we're giving instead a prayer for health. He wanted us to give a blessing, and so he then had an opportunity with this coronavirus to get up in conference and say, I bless you that this coronavirus will pass you by, as the coronavirus of Moses passed the Israelites by. Oops. You sort of failed Mormons on that one and said, we're going to have a prayer and a fast instead. Make sure you pay your fast offerings. Unbelievable. And so, yeah, the Mormons believed that a patriarch was more spiritually in tune with God, and so they went to them for blessings of health, because they were more potent, as they put it in there, if it was received from an ordained patriarch. And so in the 1940s, during the time of the gangsters, the church issued an instruction that such blessings were not to be seen as being any different than those received from any other priesthood holder. What about the fathers? I still see it today. My first ex-family, my ex's first ex's grandmother was living in squalor because of the ant that was staying, and the place was just trashed and very toxic for the air. And so every time grandmother was at home, she'd get sick, get rushed to the hospital, and then she'd get better at the hospital because it's a clean, safe environment where she's taken care of, fed, and all that. And then she's released, goes back home, gets sick again, goes back to the hospital, back and forth, back and forth. And the family members were kind of concerned, and the ex's father invited me to go with them as they needed to give her a priesthood blessing. And so you need two people typically for that, and I was there, and so he asked me to go with him to do that. And while we were there, we're talking with her, and then it's time for the blessing, and instead he passes it off to me to give the blessing, and he does the anointing. And I'm like, I don't think I should be the one. It should be you. You're her son. But, still, and she said, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so, believing in this, in the priesthood, laid my hands on her head, said the proper words, by the authority, not by the power, Mormon elders. The church is making that mistake. They keep saying by the power of the Melchizedek priesthood which I hold, or we hold. No, it's by the authority, not by the power. The power is because of your worthiness and your righteousness. And proceeded in the blessing to listen to whatever inspiration came to my head. And I was told to tell her that she had done well in raising her children, and that she doesn't need to worry about their lives. Her work is done. And I went home after that, and he and his one other sister stayed behind, and within an hour later they came back to report to the family she had passed away. And they weren't mad at me. They were saying that was exactly what she needed to hear. And as far as I knew, she just needed the house cleaned. But that's how Mormons think, is that the person who's more potent is the one they seek to for blessings for health. They don't trust the authority of any old person because they know they're not worthy to do so. And you get guys who will say, oh, I need to prepare myself for a week before I can do this, so you need to give me advance notice before I can give you an actual blessing. Just do it. But anyway, so Nelson passed up that opportunity also, as he did a prayer and a fast instead of blessing Mormons in conference to say, I bless you that you will be healed from coronavirus, or that you will be protected from getting it. Nope. Prayer and a fast, and how well is that doing? Yeah, it's the worst ever. Okay, we still have an hour and 15 minutes before the new totals from yesterday, as news broke that a assisted living facility here in Utah has had a major outbreak. The scandals. And it's all going under the radar in the national news. So anyway, this whole process needs to be restored. Fathers need to be the ones to give the patriarchal blessings. That was the original process. Hyrum, or Joseph Sr. and then Hyrum appeared to have been the ones who were in charge of the organization, trying to help Joseph elevate him in his position as the first president of the church, which was originally first elder. And that's how the organization was in the beginning. And that's just fascinating, that Brigham Young completely misconstrued the whole concept, and we now have what we have today, which is a de-evolution of the original intention. So, isn't that interesting? So, there you go. The scandal of the presiding patriarch.